A big factor that goes a long way and is a part of my secret sauce is how do you make an experience from your Airbnb?
So I love that you have taken your background in corporate analytics and diving deep into the metrics and the numbers, and it has obviously paid off. How do you model that, and how often in your experience have you hit those metrics?
Yeah, that's the foundation. Once you do it once, it's just, you take that whole template and then you apply it to another property. How do you build an experience that people would want to come and stay at?
You're listening to Copeland Morgan Media, your source for investment property analysis, education, and advice. Find us online at copelandmorgan.com. Welcome back, folks. I'm your host, Jeff Copeland, and with us today is our very own Mary Beth Blackwell. She's a realtor here with Copeland Morgan LLC. But before we dive into that, I just want to mention that today's episode is brought to you by the 1031 Investor. Dave Foster there is a friend of the show. And if you were thinking about selling real estate and buying more real estate or upgrading or downgrading your real estate portfolio and you don't want to pay Uncle Sam taxes, then you need to talk to Dave Foster. You can find him at the1031investor.com. Let him know you heard about him here. So Mary Beth, welcome. Obviously, we work together all the time. This is your first time in the Copeland Morgan studio,
Yes.
so happy you agreed to do this with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This is going to be a great experience, and I know you as my broker, as my friend, and also GC, so many different hats, and this will be one more to add to the plate.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot on the show. Like we all wear so many different hats. Real estate investors, real estate agents, landlords, you name it. And in your case, you're also sort of our resident expert on short-term rentals. Yeah. And so I would love to dive into that, but I also refer to you as one of our corporate refugees. You came to us from the corporate world, working a 9-to-5, and like many of us, I went through the same thing several years ago. You gradually build up your real estate business to the point where it allows you to break away from the 9-to-5. So with that, give us your origin story. How did you end up here, and where did you come from, and how did you get into all this?
Yeah. So, it started back, I would say about 13 to 15 years ago. I was in corporate analytics, marketing analytics, consumer insights, and really loved the industry. It's big data, working with home offices, and where I ended up getting my start is back in college, I had noticed that there was a need for understanding consumers outside of just demographics, right? So you think about somebody who may be, certain generation, certain maybe gender or income, and that's how people had been marketed to. And back in college, I had read this small little paragraph in one of my marketing courses about psychographics, and that's more around lifestyle and life stage. And so as I graduated, got into finance, and lo and behold, there were some startups that were just getting into that industry, digging into deep data, pulling out sales analytics and pairing it with loyalty card information, and then using that to understand consumers and having the right products at the right place at the right time and building stories around it to increase sales.
So I always find it so interesting how people come from other career paths, come from other professions, come from being an entrepreneur in another field, and how that experience almost always transfers directly over to real estate. We have to figure out how to market to people in the right stages of their life, and nothing could be more pertinent than life stage marketing when you're talking about a first-time home buyer. Later on, you might be talking about a real estate investor, and so that it's like falling off a log. It's a really interesting parallel to marketing to people in real estate.
Yeah, it's a consumer journey, 100%. And there may be somebody, like you said, who's a first-time home buyer, and they get their feet wet, they own a property, and they think about, look, what else can I do with this? Like, I'm going to be moving to a certain location, and I'd like to hold on to it. So what's next? Can I long-term rent it? Can I short-term rent it? Maybe I want to sell. The good news is that there are options. And so, going into those different life stages, you never know where you're going to be until you're there.
Sure. So I'm sure there are a lot of aspiring real estate investors and maybe aspiring real estate agents or investor agents listening. You have successfully made the leap, as some of us have, but as many people want to make. Like, what did you see as sort of the bar you had to reach in order to leave your corporate 9 to 5 W-2 and say, you know what, I'm going to take the leap. I'm going into real estate full time?
Yeah. So first off, just ensuring that you had the cash flow each month in order to survive, right? So you got to be able to pay your bills, got to be able to, buy some groceries and have a life. So once I hit that threshold of a certain level that I wanted to reach, and I felt like, okay, here's the time, I got enough to support my lifestyle. I said, I love corporate world, but I feel like I could do this a little bit faster on my own if I jump off and get into real estate, short-term renting first off. And then, it bubbled into where we are today as an agent, investor, and short-term rental property manager.
So for you, it was really having enough of a buffer financially to be able to, give yourself a little bit of leeway before you could start building up money on the real estate side. So I take it that you would not encourage someone who was flat broke to quit their job and start real estate.
I mean, you could, but you got to be able to pay your bills 100%. And also network and, put yourself around the people who are doing the things that you would like to do. That's a number one big step as well, outside of just being able to survive as a baseline for sure.
Yeah, there are so many people that'll tell you surround yourself with the people you want to become or you want to be like, and that's a great point.
Yeah, and I think I've heard someone say even you are the average of the top 5 people you spend the most time with.
Sure.
And it's very true. If you are in a place where, you want to invest in real estate and you're hanging out with friends that are, maybe on social media all the time, or maybe they're whatever their interests are, but it has nothing to do with real estate. It's going to be hard to make that leap. One, because you're not going to be thinking in that mindset. Mindset is so critical. Just being in that space and being able to ask those questions from people who have already done it, who have experienced it, and enjoy talking about it too. That's a big.
That's actually probably one of the downsides of hanging out with a bunch of real estate investors is everybody could sit around for hours and hours and hours talking about real estate, and at some point you have to get something else done.
No, me.
So you hit briefly on short-term rentals. Should we do short-term rentals? And I know you have owned and managed some short-term rentals in North Carolina, Jacksonville, and in the Tampa Bay area. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I ended up getting into short-term rentals back in 2015. So going back to my corporate job, I worked as a consultant within grocery chains and worked within their home office. At the time, I was living in Jacksonville and had worked in this role with Southeastern Grocers, and ended up with my company. A new client came on board, which was in North Carolina, nowhere close to Jacksonville. So I thought, what can I do to hold on to this property? And my first thought was, well, rent it. So ended up going into long-term rentals for 3 years. Fast forward, I'd come back once every quarter, and that was maybe 4 times a year, right? To go and check on the property, make sure it's still standing. Are, the tenants happy? And I thought, well, this is my house and somebody else is living in it. Granted, they are paying the mortgage and, making some cash flow, but, I'd always gone to Airbnbs when I traveled, and I thought, it'd be so cool if I could do that myself. So put together some numbers and said, okay, what's the average nightly rate? And I was like, I don't know. So I was like, well, what's the next best thing? Well, hotels. So started to look at the hotels surrounding me, did a benchmark for an average nightly rate, looked at, okay, if, we can furnish this and renovate it and, can do anything for a year. Let's just lift it up, see what happens. And yeah, it's been since
And I take it was a success.
Yeah, the first night, I'll never forget, I was living up in North Carolina at the time. So I ended up doing the renovations out of state, remotely. I get up generally about 4 a.m. before work, plan things out, what are we going to do? What's going to be the design? What's going to be, not only the design for how are we going to build out a new kitchen, because things needed to be updated, right? But also, what's going to be the theme of the house? How do you build an experience that people would want to come and stay at? There's got to be something unique about the property. So, yeah, I would get up, think about how am I going to build this out.
And where did you end up? What was the theme of your first Airbnb?
Yeah, so if you saw this house, it was a very coastal house, and I thought that was very pigeonholed or very specific to a certain type of clientele. And the theme that I ended up going with is, I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to researching, so I got into the different architectural digest and Pinterest and started to see a theme of mid-century modern, and I really liked it. I liked that it was kind of like a hybrid of Palm Springs. 1970s has always been a style that's really, fit with my personality. I don't know what it is, but my eye catches to it. And geometric shapes. I think that you can do something interesting when you play off of, a city or a place that is already has its roots and popularity. Think about color plays with different hexagons or different shapes. So anyway, that was the impetus. Again, research to the nth degree, did some homework, and just started to put together the design for.
So the mid-century modern coastal home is in Jacksonville.
This is in Jacksonville.
Awesome.
Yes.
So I love that you have taken your background in corporate analytics and diving deep into the metrics and the numbers. And in my experience, you do so very cautiously and make sure you're confident in those numbers and those numbers are going to work before you pull the trigger.
Absolutely.
And it has obviously paid off because you were successful with not just that short-term rental, but you have a few more now, correct?
Mm-hmm. I do. So, it was an unintentional step to get into short-term rentals. It was by chance, and it was just trying to find a solve for, the things that I wanted. I wanted to have my cake and eat it too, which was keep my house while moving to another location, but also getting to live in the neighborhood again. I love my neighbors. That's one of the things too, getting to have relationships with the people is hard to leave behind. So yes, Jacksonville is one property. Once I went through the process of putting one together, understanding how to operate once it's on Airbnb, guest relations, building out a team, all the steps, that's the foundation. Once you do it once, it's just, you take that whole template and then you apply it to another property. So I did that again in North Carolina and about to do that one more time here in St. Pete.
Awesome. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you are an Airbnb Super Host.
Yes.
More than once. What does that mean? I stay in Airbnbs all the time. I guess I'm a super guest, but what is a super host?
Yeah, super host. It is a badge that you get to wear, kind of like when you see on, Twitter, you get the badge, the blue check, whatnot. So basically is once you have established your listing and you have a certain rating, so 5 stars, also have a number of reviews, you have certain criteria, like, you have where guests will rate you on your cleanliness, your hospitality. So all these different areas of, marks that Airbnb wants you to hit as a host, then they'll say, look, you are one of the best. And they give you that special badge, which, is very helpful too from a host standpoint, because that puts your listing towards the top of the results when somebody's coming in to say, hey, I want to stay in Jacksonville or St. Pete or whatever. It puts you towards the top and
top of the listings or the properties that pop up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right.
And
it
they
gives
do
you
that
more
once a
credibility.
year?
They do it 4 times a year.
Okay.
So in order to get started, like I said, you have to have a certain amount of reviews, certain level of rating. It has to be, I believe, like 4 stars or higher, 0 cancellations. And you have to establish that for at least a year prior to them starting to review. And then you're updated every quarter. They go through the process, make sure that you still hit those marks. And if you do, they're like, good job. Here's your Superhost badge.
Cool. So 0, I want to clarify, 0 cancellations by the host, correct? Because
Correct.
obviously it's not your fault if the guest cancels.
That's right.
But you can't become a Superhost after 1 quarter. It has to be a year of sustained performance, and then the next quarter after that first year, you would be in contention for that award. And you've won it 6, 7 times?
Yeah, I think it was last week, got it 7 times.
Awesome. You have to update that. I think our website says 6x.
Yeah.
You got to put a 7x in there now.
Absolutely. Let's go. Lucky number 7.
So going back to the analytics part of it, a lot of people run the numbers on a long-term rental. Mm-hmm. It's going to be cash flow positive, 5% cap rate, whatever. I'm going to pocket $200 a month after I pay all my operating expenses and my debt service. Yeah. And then they compare that with short-term rentals and say, well, if I can get 90% occupancy and, I'm going to be paying higher management fees, I'm going to have higher turnover costs. Mm-hmm. And, but if I could do this, maybe I make $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
My question, I guess, for people who are weighing the two options is, how do you model that, and how often in your experience have you hit those metrics where, this is blowing a long-term rental out of the water? There's no doubt that we need to be doing short-term. Yeah,
so those are really good questions, and it's really simple, to be honest. What I'd say is you look at your nightly rate first. When you model out from a long-term rental standpoint, you go on to your tools, whatever they may be. You can Google it if you want to look at what is a average market rent for.
What are some tools that you use, just as sort of a little nugget to throw out here for our listeners?
I like Rentometer. It's one of my favorite tools. I'll just go online as well to see what are, say on Zillow, just go across the board to different
for
websites.
Long-term.
For long-term, right. Absolutely. But it's pretty similar for short-term as well. And once you have a benchmark for what is market rental rates in the area, what is that going to be long-term over a year, right? And so you forecast that out. Could be like $1,500 a month. Understand what your debt service is, so your mortgage, interest, taxes. Think about the other types of expenses that you're going to have. 10% for CapEx, right? If you want to manage, what is that fee going to be?
Another 8 or 10%. Yeah, and a lot of people, I think, once you do that with a long-term rental for a single-family home, for example, most of them are going to be pretty darn close to break even. You don't have to replace the roof this year. You might get to technically pocket that CapEx for the year, but you're going to spend it at some point. The roof is going to have to be replaced in 15 years or whatever.
It's kind of like phantom cash flow in a sense. Like you have it in your pocket, but down the road, and I should squirrel it away
ideally
for the rainy day.
That as a reserve.
Absolutely.
But I find that most single-family homes, and I say this all the time, as a long-term rental, they're going to be really close to break even. And that's okay. If you're cash flow positive and you're paying your debt, you're paying your operating expenses, you're paying off your mortgage, and you're not putting money into the property, that's a win, because you keep that property for 15, 20 years, you pay off the mortgage. Now it's all cash flow.
It's huge. It's cash flow in many different ways.
Yep.
I mean, somebody's paying off a mortgage, so you have this asset that's one of the biggest purchases that you'll ever make, right? Somebody else is paying down that mortgage. You may have put down, say, maybe 20% for a down payment at most. You're leveraging somebody else's money to have this very valuable asset. Somebody else is paying that mortgage down. It's appreciating. On your taxes, you get to depreciate. Yeah, so all those capital expenses. And then, hey, if you're coming down to travel to, say, Florida or somewhere else that you enjoy, you get to take that as a write-off as well. So, there's so many different benefits.
Absolutely. And I am not knocking. I own several single-family homes, and I agree with everything you said, but they're generally going to operate close to break even. That's just kind of a proven fact.
Yeah. I think the benchmark that I had heard
go ahead.
Was about $200 a month in free cash flow is generally what you can expect to see in long-term rentals.
That's not going to change anybody's life.
No. So it's a numbers game. You need to have about 5 to 10 or X. The scale is going to be where you see your numbers and your financial freedom in long-term rentals. Short-term rentals, you don't need as many.
Well, that's what I was getting at is how does that differ from your typical short-term rental, and how much more cash flow can you realistically expect, and what type of occupancy rates do you typically see? Yeah, so I hear a lot from investors or residential everyday people who are like, hey, I want to get into the short-term rental game. How do I find that 90% occupancy location? And I don't think it exists. I don't think it'll ever exist. And I mean, you'll hit those numbers. You'll have 100% sometimes. But I think benchmarking your goal off of an occupancy rate is going to be very challenging. I think what is going to be ideal for anyone
to start with is, what is your monthly cash flow that you're looking to reach? And then you can work backwards. So when it comes to short-term rentals, what I tend to do is take a look at what is the market calling for in a nightly rate, and then forecast that out with a very conservative occupancy rate. I'll go anywhere between 65 to 70%, just to sandbag it, because you never know what's going to happen. We could have, a very high season where everybody's wanting to travel. And there is seasonality to it. It's variable every month. Some people just may not be traveling in the month of January. We may have COVID. You got to be able to factor in if, in April of 2021, Florida shut down for a month and it was like an oh shit moment. Like, what are we going to do? So you got to factor those into your occupancy rate. So that's why I say 90%, 100%, like that's going to be very tough if you're going to forecast your models off of just occupancy rate. So I would say, have a goal for your monthly income. So if it's $1,300 a month, okay, what type of property at a 65 to 75% occupancy rate will garner that $1,300 a month?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and it seems so obvious in retrospect, but if you charge less money, you're going to have higher occupancy.
Yeah.
If you charge more money, you're going to have lower occupancy. And so it's finding the sweet spot that gets you the most occupancy at the most rate.
Yeah.
And so that's a great point. You can't just pick one or the other. You got to pick nightly rate and occupancy, and then figure out what's realistic. What's a realistic range for both, and then crunch your numbers.
There's so many different variables. Yeah. Price is a factor. I would say, of course, location. Location. You hear that all the time in real estate, and it's true. So if you're by the beach versus, say, somewhere out in the middle of nowhere that nobody's going to travel to, you're going to have a very hard time finding somebody who's going to want to stay at your place. A big factor that goes a long way and is a part of my secret sauce is, how do you make an experience from your Airbnb? So how do you make it uniquely stand out from everybody else? And, you don't have to get crazy about it, but, we are the customer, right? So I think it's easy to make it complex and say, what is it that everybody wants? Well, what do you want? Do you want to have a pool and a banging backyard with like a fire pit and all the things? Like, what are the things that you enjoy? And build that out and make it a little bit more unique than what you see around in that market. What I found, when I've stayed at different places, is sometimes people will take their house and they'll just maybe clean it up, put a bar of soap in the bathroom, put some, amenities in there, but they don't make it a little unique. So how do you make it fun? How do you make it stand out?
Yeah, that's a great point. Even as a regular Airbnb user, 123 Main Street is 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and comes with free soap. Versus, hey, the mid-century modern coastal cottage.
Yeah.
Just giving it a name and a theme and an experience and a vibe, I probably goes a long way towards moving you up the list of maybes when people are shopping for a place to stay. That's a great point.
Yeah. So Jacksonville, what makes it unique is the mid-century modern design. Put together some elements that you wouldn't expect, at least. I think that kind of break the rules, like gray hexagon tile backsplash with gold glitter grout, kind of little black with a little gold. Sometimes those don't play nice in the design world, so to speak, but it gives it a little bit something, to see. And
at least it's not cookie cutter. It's different.
And it's walkable. So you kind of like pick up on those features and really blast that out. So it's walkable to, restaurants, bars, fun places, things to do, close to the Jag Stadium. So we get a lot of football fans coming in, people that want to go to the beaches. Neighbors have family who come in to visit, but they don't necessarily want to house them at their places, and it can kind of get a little maybe over cozy. The house in North Carolina is on a lake, small lake, albeit my friends call it a pond up there. I call it a lake, so I call it a lake pond. But just kind of pick up on those elements that people kind of would like to have. So you can go kayaking on the lake. You have a dog run in the backyard. Just open up the door, let the dogs run out, and so the house is called. The theme is a lake house theme. So
awesome. Yeah, any type of water feature is nice to look at, even if it is just a pond. But that actually brings up another point, and I think this is relevant to all real estate investors, all landlords, all real estate agents, and that's photography.
100%.
If your photos are not good, whether it's a rental listing, whether it's a for sale listing, whether it's an Airbnb, you are competing with the rest of them on the basis of your photos. So what would you tell people out there who are thinking, well, should I just take them with my phone, or should I hire a professional photographer? Or how do you handle the photography aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's very tempting to kind of think about, all right, I'm going to spend $100, $200 to have a professional photographer to come out. I can just do this on my iPhone 13. You know, it's got a nice freaking camera on it. Why not? But photographers really know how to capture the essence of your home and make it really stand out. So it really puts your best foot forward. Yes, it may cost you a little bit of money, but it'll pay you back in dividends.
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. And my wife, as you know, is a professional photographer. And
Amazing.
I can tell you, it may take you 10 seconds to take that photo, but a professional photographer is going to spend another 10 minutes or more in post-processing, editing that photo, adjusting the colors and the color balance. And I don't even know what all the things are called, but it's not just composing and taking the photo, which is crucial, but it's the post-processing and the editing and the you know, the final version of the photo sometimes looks very different from what was in camera.
Absolutely.
And so, there is a huge difference between iPhone 13 and professional photographer. And so if you learn nothing else from this episode, you remember, you're competing not on the basis of your property, on the basis of the photos of your property that you're using in your marketing. Yeah,
that's going to be the first picture that anybody sees in the listing. So, you know, you want to put your best foot forward so that you're selling your property. You're not just like, oh, I'm just someone, Joe Schmo, taking a picture, because then that'll kind of give the impression of that's the experience a guest is going to have. If they have a professional photo that they see, they're like, yeah, I want to, wow, this is kind of a nice place. Like, let's look at this picture. Oh yeah, we got all this color. We got like the golden hour hit. I mean, people don't necessarily think that. I
Even
believe,
the time of day can make such a huge difference in the look and feel of your place. That's another great point.
Absolutely.
So another question that I have, and I know a lot of people struggle with this here locally in Pinellas County, St. Pete, Clearwater. Those are the two big cities, but we actually have 24 different cities in Pinellas County. Yeah. Everyone has their own rules. Some allow short-term rentals, some don't. Some do, but it depends on zoning. So for someone who's sitting in Chicago or Minnesota and they're thinking about buying a short-term rental in Pinellas County, how do you navigate that matrix of municipalities and then zoning to figure out, can I even do that with this house?
Yeah, so there are 27 different municipalities, and you think, when you look at a map of Pinellas County, it's just this little arm on the side of Tampa Bay, like no big deal, you know. But it's dicey once you start thinking about, okay, where can I short-term rent? And so if I were to tell anyone in state, out of state, there's an Excel sheet that we've put together. We have one, but I want to say
the most recent one is Pinellas Realtor has one.
Pro has
we'll
one.
Put that in the show notes. You'll be able to click right through there. It has a quick blurb for each city and a point of contact for each city. So if you're not sure, you can call this particular person and ask about this particular address, and they'll tell you.
That's right.
A lot of people do it, even though it may not strictly be allowed. For example, the city of St. Petersburg allows you to rent on a short-term basis, less than 30 days, no more than 3 times in any calendar year. Now, if you looked on Airbnb, you would find hundreds and hundreds of Airbnbs, and they sort of allow them to keep operating until somebody complains and it triggers code enforcement. And then when you get that nasty gram from the city, more than likely you're going to have some cancellations. You're going to have to stop operating your Airbnb, and you're going to have to transition to a different model, be it long-term rentals or seasonal rentals or whatever. So that municipal rules and then the zoning overlay on top of that is crucial to people who are thinking about doing this, because even if you find a place and you can't do it and you do it anyway, more power to you, but have a backup plan, have a plan B, because you may not be able to do it forever. Yeah,
and that's a very good point. That have an exit strategy, 100%. If you're short-term renting, think about, what else can I do if this doesn't work? If this model, say we do get shut down with code enforcement, or maybe just not seeing the bookings that I wanted to have in order to reach my cash flow goals, all right, what's going to be my backup? So for me, it's short-term rentals. If it doesn't work, exit strategy is long-term rentals. If long-term rentals aren't working, sell. And, you know, that's kind of sad to think about maybe selling, but when you buy and hold long term, you get to take all of the appreciation that you've accumulated over time and get that benefit. So at the end of the day,
and in some cases, you might be able to do a 1031 exchange, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, and roll that into another property, and then maybe a better location or a bigger property without paying tax on the capital gain.
That's right. Things happen for a reason. So it could look like, man, darn, this is not a positive. But I think long term, it generally is.
So one of the reasons we scheduled this is you are being featured in the spring issue of Bigger Pockets Wealth magazine. If you're not familiar with it, it's a hard copy paper, old school paper magazine that Bigger Pockets puts out, I believe, once per quarter or maybe 4 or 5 times a year. I don't know their exact distribution schedule. This is obviously an older release of it because the current one's not out yet. But how did that come about? How did the magazine find you and end up doing a profile on you? And what should we expect to see in the magazine?
Yeah, so the article is going to be around biggest mistakes and biggest learnings. So I'm kind of like, oh shoot, really? I'm going to air out all of like my mistakes. But hey, if someone is going to learn from it, that's great. It's through Bigger Pockets, and I was reached out to through one of the forums. So I like to be very active on Bigger Pockets. It's a great resource for me in terms of education, learning, networking. And then I like to give back as well. So there was a request for anyone who had biggest mistakes, and I put in, hey, yep, that was me. Here's mine. Didn't want to air it out, but yeah, had a big party at one of my properties, and I let it happen. It happened. So if you'd like for me to get into the story, I can
Yeah,
share
that
a
would be
little bit
great.
about
I was
it.
just going to say, what are some of these mistakes? So we can get a little preview of the magazine. But I think that all ties together with what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
If maybe you're doing it in St. Pete and you're not supposed to be doing it, and then all of a sudden they have a
absolutely.
party, which gets the neighbors angry, which gets code enforcement involved.
Yeah.
One bad mistake could literally shut down your business in Airbnb.
Yeah, and you put together different steps in your process, and once you have that, all your checks and balances, you're in a good spot. And I think everybody kind of knows in the back of your mind, like, this is what I need to do in order for something to be successful. So for me, what ended up happening is I'm very big on tech for operating my properties. That's how I can manage remotely and feel like I'm still there. So ended up happening where I had lifted up the North Carolina property, ended up having somebody who rented it for a long weekend, 3 days. And the reason why they were renting was they wanted to have a place for themselves and 3 other girls for a wedding. So they were part of a bachelorette party. They're going to be at the wedding events. And so what I had noticed as I left the property, I was kind of going back and forth between North Carolina and Charleston at the time. And I had noticed when I left 2 days before that the front doorbell video camera. So I like to make sure that I have visibility to the outside of the property just to make sure things are, okay, kosher. And so the video doorbell went down, and I didn't know why. And so I turned on some switches, turned some other switches off, just regular flip switches. And nothing was working. So I was like, okay, well, it's maybe some small electrical issue. The next guest, no big deal. They'll be here for 3 days. They're going to be at wedding events the whole time. Like, okay, we can wait until they're done. They're out. Yeah, I found out through, so it was the time that they were supposed to check out. They weren't checking out at 11 o'clock. And I was like on the phone with them, and I was like, hey, how's it going? Like, it's checkout time. And they're like, yeah, we kind of need a little bit more time. Like, and I was like, well, why? 'Cause I'll work with you if we can. And they said, we have a flight that's going to be delayed, and it's in Charlotte, and it's going to be leaving like in about 4 hours. And I was like, well, Charlotte's about an hour and a half away. You need to get going now. Like, this doesn't make sense. So anyway, what I found out is that wasn't adding up. And then I got this message on Airbnb from a neighbor that said, hey, do you know that there are people taking like things from your house and putting it in the back of the truck? And I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean? And I met this neighbor, but we never exchanged phone numbers. So he was like, here's my number. And this is through an Airbnb message. So he just knew it was up. So I called him, and it was my neighbor, Brandon. And he's like, hey, there are people at your house taking like the heaters, the light heaters, the lamps from outside, like putting in the back of the truck. Looks like they have like a vacuum cleaner. Like, what's going on? I'm like, what do you mean what's going on? And so I said, I think there was a party like the past 2 nights. And I was like, a party? And he's like, yeah. So I am very close with my neighbor across the street, Charlie. I called him up and I was like, hey, Charlie, something going on? And he's like, yeah, there were over 20 cars at the house for 2 nights in a row. So lo and behold, find out there were like these parties with 30 people. It was a 30th birthday party. No wedding, no bachelorettes, just straight 30th bash.
Just a 3-day party.
It was oh my God. I was like, man. So anyway, lo and behold, what I learned is that you can have some checks and balances in place. Had the Ring doorbell been on and working properly, I would have been able to capture that pretty quickly. Got everything set up now. Will never happen again. Full visibility.
So just to clarify, the Ring doorbell was sort of unrelated. It just happened to go down before these guests had their 3-day birthday bash. They were it's not like they unplugged it. It was already not working.
Exactly.
But it just kind of added fuel to the fire.
Yeah, that was on me. And what I ended up learning is that, look, it's just a quick call to your electrician to come out. So I did once I got back. Everything cleaned up with the cleaners. Thank God, they're the best.
So were they taking your stuff or their stuff?
That was their stuff, but also some of my stuff. There was about $1,000 in my stuff that they took. Yeah, wow. They had Alexa's, vacuum cleaner, a few dishes, and other stuff. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Did you have enough of a deposit to make yourself whole?
So Airbnb has, that's one of the things that I like about Airbnb is they have host coverage. I think it's called Airbnb Care now. They just changed it. And so you're insured up to $1 million in liability. But what I learned is that you have to put in your claim prior to the next guest coming in. And so for me, what ended up happening was it was a same day checkout, check-in. And I reached out to my cleaning team because I was still in Charlotte. So I was remote and I just reached out to everyone in my team. I was like, hey, we got to figure this out. All right. Cleaning team was like, okay, we can get this done. Like, that was a big question. Can we get this turned in enough time to continue to host the next guest? And I was like, it's up to you. Like, you let me know, is this manageable? Like, how intense is this? And they're like, we got this. They brought in the reinforcements, cleaned it up, got it all turned in about 3 hours or less, which was amazing. I mean, this place was a wreck. There were like shit thrown everywhere. It was bad. Just puke, all the stuff. Yeah, it was not good. There's a video. I'll share that with you.
Can we put that in the show notes as a warning to potential Airbnb
Yes,
hosts?
there was this sign on the front door that said, do not ring the doorbell. It was rough. But you have to put your claim in prior to the next guest. My focus was on customer service, making sure the guest
you had 3 hours to go or no go. So I can see that's almost worth eating the $1,000 in damages to make sure you don't mess up have to cancel on a guest who maybe just arrived at the airport. A lot of things to juggle there in a 3 hour window.
Right. And then it goes against your super host status if you cancel. So I was like, what do you do? So I was like, customer first, make sure that they have a place. And it kind of bit me because I did reach out to Airbnb, submitted the claim, but they said, hey, can't really tie it back to which guest it was. And I was like, but look, I got the video with timestamp, all this. And they're like, yeah, sorry. But it's a learning experience.
Yeah, well, that's a great nugget for any Airbnb hosts out there. If you have damages and you think Airbnb is going to cover those damages, don't let anybody else check in until you submit that claim.
Yep, there's a time clock on it. Get it in as soon as possible.
So, wrapping it up with a couple of more sort of generic market questions. I asked this of a lot of people, and I love the different perspectives on the answer. Where do you see the Tampa Bay real estate market going in the next 2 to 5 years?
Well, I think it's going to continue to go up. I feel like some people believe that's naive, but no. If you feel like, since the pandemic, priorities, lifestyle has changed. I talk to my friends about it and I say, 2 years ago, if we ever said the word pandemic, like we were talking about a sci-fi movie. Since then, people, their values, what they want to have, we see more people flocking from the urban cities and small spaces like New York, California, apartment buildings to where they can stretch out and have some space, single family homes, multifamily homes. And I think, being by the beaches, maybe people didn't really think that was something that they could do or wanted to do or just put it off. And now, pandemic has changed your perspective. Like, I got to do it now, right? Time is of the essence. So I think priorities have changed, values have changed. I think for the Tampa Bay, St. Pete market, it's going to be about, the features that we have, the beaches. Downtown is flourishing. Oh my gosh, it's so fun down there. Oh, you have all the restaurants, you have speakeasies. Like, there's one that's a laundromat.
I love that when you have to put in a special code to open the washing machine to get into the bar part.
Yeah. You walk in and then there's it's a Cuban fare. You're going to have Cuban sandwiches, bottomless mimosas on Sundays. And, it's all kind of going back to that 1920s style with a unique flair to it. So you got that in downtown St. Pete, New Pier, Vinoy Park. It's very, walkable. You see a lot of outdoor enthusiasts. There's beach volleyball. I mean, if you're an outdoors person, St. Pete is your place. Tampa, corporations are coming into the market. Even in St. Pete, Kathy Wood, ARC Investments, they're now here. I think Foot Locker, they're coming down as well. So, when you think about, businesses that are anchoring jobs or starting to open up, people's priorities have changed of where they want to be, what they want to do. I feel like our market's going to continue to go up. And I think Zillow, they just came out with their forecast and they said St. Pete is expected to appreciate at 24.6% in 2022. Benchmark that against the national average at 17%. We're in a good place.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I've had several people in that chair and asked them the same question, and all tend to have a similar response. And for me, it comes down to basic economics. The only way prices can go down is if supply exceeds demand.
Absolutely.
And I don't see them building 100,000 housing units anywhere around here at the moment. They can't build housing fast enough to keep up with population growth. We're already in a deficit. And so that just keeps the prices, it props up prices, or it drives prices up, in addition to the investor money flowing here from other higher price markets. So
everything's about supply and demand.
It is a challenging market to be a buyer. Cash flow and cap rates are definitely being compressed.
Yeah.
But there's also this movement or this shift in thinking. You talked about mindset of, at 27, 24% appreciation, let's just get in the path of progress. Buy something that in the path of where things are being redeveloped. And so there's a lot of people seeking appreciation in addition to cash flow. But appreciation is something that you really can't ignore. And that scares a lot of people. It's like, oh, no, we only invest for cash flow. And that's always been sort of the mantra of real estate investors: cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. Get appreciation if it's a cherry on top. But you can't ignore 20%, 20%, 24% over a 3-year span. And so people are starting to perk up at the appreciation that we're seeing as well. And again, if you go back to the supply and demand, it's very unlikely that prices are going to decline anytime soon, for better, for worse.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at it as an investment class, real estate, it's one of many, right? You have your stocks. S&P average is about 7-8%. It can go up or down. I know that we had a really strong market last year. Kind of a little wavery right now, but it's a good asset class to hedge and diversify your portfolio in, and you get to live in it too, potentially, or short-term rent and come visit. So, when you think about that, it's one way to be creative. I mean, like I said, stocks, bonds, real estate, NFTs, cryptocurrency. I mean, there's so many different things that you could do. It's really fun. You just get to be creative.
And aside from the cash flow, which covers the operating expenses and it covers the debt service, the real secret to real estate is to build equity. And equity equals options. Absolutely. It gives you so many ways to tap that equity on the back end. So.
You can do a cash out refi, go buy another property, leverage property that you already have. I mean, you're not...
More than one way to get that money tax-free. Cash out refi, 1031 exchange. There's so many different ways to minimize taxes and maximize your return on that money.
I like calling it going green. You're recycling.
Absolutely. Using the same money over and over again. What's a word of advice or a tool or words of wisdom that you would give to an aspiring real estate investor looking to kind of establish a beachhead or a toehold in the Tampa Bay real estate market? Because you were that person not long ago.
I was, I would say just research. Go on Bigger Pockets. There's many different forums around the St. Pete, Tampa market. There are people that are interested. They're beginners. And then there's some who are very experienced investors, lenders. the people that you would want to have on your team are there. So go out, talk to people, network. What's really changed and catapulted my education when I was first starting out was going to investor meetups. So if you can do that, one, you can meet like-minded people. There was one that I went to in Fayetteville called Pints and Properties with 5 pillars. Met some really great contacts. You find friends. You find other people that are into short-term rentals. One of my good friends that I met there ended up moving from Fayetteville, sold about 4 or 5 properties, and purchased a property near Ybor and is renting it out as a short-term rental. So we get to like nerd out on different Airbnb like strategies, and he's got like a mural that he's going to paint out with like a rooster. You see roosters walking through like Ybor, this and that. So anyway, it helps you with your education, gives you an outlet if you wanted to talk about real estate with people who really want to talk about it too.
Sure.
And so I would say bigger pockets.
That was supposed to be my last question, but I'm going to put you on the spot because I do get asked this question quite a lot, and I don't really have the time to dive into them anymore. But what are the good meetup groups in the Tampa Bay area? When do they meet? How do you find them? How do you sign up to get notified of the meetings? Where are these meetups, and when and how and where are you going?
Yeah, I would say the best meetups are the ones at breweries. Those are the ones that I hit up.
But is there a particular group, or do you use meetup.com, or how are you finding them?
Trying to think. I don't really remember how I found the one here in Tampa. I think I just ended up going on Bigger Pockets and like Googling in their version of Google search investor meetups. And then I think I actually went to Google and put in investor meetups. And to be honest, it was huge for me because one of the things that was a big change moving from corporate life to non-corporate life, working in real estate, you don't have that W-2 income. And so if you wanted to be financed, like you can't go through a traditional lender. So you have to be creative. And what I ended up doing is making a relationship with a lender at one of the real estate investor meetups here in Tampa Bay. And they're now my lender who's helping me out with private funds, doing a hard money loan on this renovation project.
Yeah, and we just walked your property this morning. I think it's going to be a really cute little place.
I'm super excited about it. It's a bungalow, 1925. It's super small, so it's a good one to,
Have you picked out a theme yet?
I'm trying to. So I feel like the neighborhood kind of drives what that theme is, the property, and then you build off of that and iterate. I'm not sure yet, so you may have to go back and forth with you and see what you think.
You'll have to get back to us on that.
Yeah,
well, thank you so much. This has been a really interesting sort of dive into short-term rentals and transitioning from your 9 to 5 and everything else that you have going on. I wish you all the best here with our brokerage, obviously. And thank you for being on today.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Another way to, meet up, talk, and speak about real estate. So thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to the Copeland Morgan Media Real Estate Podcast. As you can imagine, producing this great educational content takes a lot of effort and commitment on our part. We only ask one thing in return. Please subscribe to our podcast using your favorite podcast app or by visiting copelandmorgan.com/podcast. And remember, there's no greater compliment than referring us to a friend or colleague. Until next time, I'm Jeff Copeland.